Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. Another round of why politicians will not tell you the truth. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. For the past 48 years, Democrats have controlled the city of Baltimore. During that time, the city's population has fallen 30%, and the poverty situation has grown more intense. During the past 5 years, the federal government has poured billions of dollars into the poor areas of Baltimore, stimulus money. Total taxpayer money given, $1.8 billion. One poor neighborhood, Midtown Belvedere, got a whopping $838 million. That includes $467 million to education, $206 million to the environment, $24 million to, quote, the family, $15 million to transportation, and on and on. The result? Not much improvement.
One of the things that we learned this week is Baltimore spends the third highest amount per capita on its public schools. Baltimore was already spending plenty on public schools, and the schools were still lousy.
Well, there's uneven spending in the public schools, and I would say to you, even the school that let out where the riots first began, there was a student who was interviewed who said, "I'm looking at a book that's 20 years old."
So either the money is being stolen, or the Democratic administration in Baltimore is so incompetent that despite billions in funding pouring in from we the taxpayers, poverty and hopelessness remain entrenched. Instead of pointing that out, President Obama today stated the problem, but totally avoided the solution.
Those opportunity gaps begin early, often at birth, and then compound over time, becoming harder and harder to bridge, making too many young men and women feel like no matter how hard they try, they may never achieve their dreams.
Then give them a roadmap to dream achievement, Mr. President, which you have done to your credit with the My Brother's Keeper program. But what you have not done is spotlighted the total failure of money politics. It is the behavior of individual human beings, not big daddy government, that leads to success. And touting that message is free of charge. This is just brutal. And poor Americans trapped in the ghettos have a right to be furious. But their anger should be directed at the corrupt, dishonest politicians who are lying to them. The truth is, liberal policies of creating dependence and entitlement, promoting victimization and anger, have failed to help Americans who desperately need help. Once again, these stats are in stone. Billions poured into Baltimore. Improvement almost non-existent. Now another example of truth evading from the opposite side of the spectrum. There is no question that the Clinton Foundation has benefited Bill and Hillary Clinton by allowing them an affluence few human beings will ever experience. Nearly $2 billion have flowed into the Clinton Foundation. In just a few moments, we'll have a segment on what you can do with foundation money legally, and you'll be surprised. But President Clinton believes there is nothing wrong, even though the Clinton Foundation now has to refile its income taxes because it neglected to mention some very big donors. And even though Hillary Clinton violated a signed agreement with President Obama by accepting foreign money for the foundation while she was Secretary of State. Despite all that, here's Mr. Clinton.
I give 10% of my revenue off the top every year to the foundation. And Hillary, in the year she was there, gave 17. Over the last 15 years, I've taken almost no capital gains. And I've given 10% more to pay my bills, and because in the
regular working Americans look and say $500,000 for a speech.
Well, why shouldn't it's the most independence I can get.
It's the most independence I can get. Now, there is no way on earth that Bill and Hillary Clinton are going to admit to any wrongdoing. But they have to know that the whole foundation thing is unethical, to say the least. But as long as it's not illegal, apparently they're fine with it. So the question becomes, what about the legality of the foundation? Shouldn't the Clinton Foundation be investigated? Of course it should. And I'm not on a witch hunt here. But there's big money involved in foreign countries at a Secretary of State and a former president. The FBI can start that investigation tomorrow. Doesn't need President Obama's approval, and it doesn't need Attorney General Lynch's approval. So my question tonight is for FBI Director James Comey. Will you start an investigation? Today we presented that question formally to the FBI. We'll let you know what the agency says. And that's a memo. Now for the top story tonight, reaction joining us from Washington, Charles Krauthammer. Let's start with Baltimore. $1.8 billion in 5 years.
Right.
Okay.
Well, you can look, you can reach the same conclusion by looking at a contrary event. Apart from the fact that when you pour the money in, it leaves no trace. Look what happened to the seminal piece of social legislation, the 1996 Abolition of Welfare as an Entitlement, signed by President Clinton. In the next 6 years, now remember, liberals were screaming, this is going to throw kids into the street, will cause destitution, a spike in poverty. The poverty rate for black children declined from 41.5% to 30%. Declined in the next 6 years. That was the biggest decline in recorded history, and it ended up at the lowest level since records have been kept. And that's because and this is a lesson we learned in the 80s and the 90s when we saw the results of the war on poverty, when you pour money in and you sort of reinforce the rotten and corrupt and obsolete structures, you not only don't do any good, you create dependency and you make things worse.
Right.
That was the lesson of the 1980s.
And by welfare reform, it forced people to go out and work, and some of those people started to embrace the workplace and move up, and therefore more money flowed. But I have to ask you, you live down there in the Washington, Baltimore area. Are they stealing the money? Is that what's happening? Is the federal money goes in, the checks are cashed, it goes in, nothing gets better. Schools don't get better, books don't get better, nothing gets better. Are they stealing it?
Look, it's not just Washington or Baltimore. In 1970, since 1970, per capita spending in the entire United States on education has doubled. Test scores have remained flat or by some measures have declined. What it is they pour this money into bureaucracies. There's always the middleman. You've got these extra programs that do nothing, and in the end you end up with nothing for the kids. The unions are fat. The Democrats who get the donations of the unions are fat. The government structures are fat, and the kids end up poor, uneducated, and with their lives
it's siphoned
ruined
off into things that don't benefit the children or don't benefit the poor people who are looking for a grip. Just give me a grip so I can climb. All right. It's such a maze. When this money goes in, it's so easy to hide it. It's so easy to divert it. It's so easy to use it for purposes that it's not supposed to be. You know, I give money to a school, the Trey Whitfield School here in New York City. And the reason I do is it's one of the worst neighborhoods in the city. But this is a private school, mostly minority. They have the kids in school uniforms. They have demonstrable test scores. You can see what they're doing. There's discipline everywhere. The kids come from bad homes, the same way the public schools are. But once they get in the doorway, there's an agenda of personal responsibility for each student. I give them money. All right? That's exactly the model that should be in the ghetto public schools and in every public school. Last word.
And that's exactly the model that liberalism rejects. What it ought to do, what everybody knows it should do, what it resists doing, is to allow, for example, teachers to be gotten rid of, even if they have seniority, to judge them on the basis of merit. The unions don't allow that. And secondly, as the kind of school you support, when a kid's in a bad neighborhood, let them have the kind of choice the rich limousine liberals have when they send their kids.
The voucher thing.
And that is fought tooth and nail by the unions and by the Democrats who protect them.
But it's even worse than that. The minority community here in New York City elected the most left-wing government the city has ever seen. And one of the first things they did was erode the discipline in the public schools, which is already lax. So now you can spit at a teacher or curse at a teacher or even hit a teacher, and you're not automatically expelled. And you think these kids are hopeless and can't learn? Okay, just look at the policies of the people they are electing. And they're all on the far left. They're all there.